Warm welcome, everybody. And thank you for your interest and your time to attend today's webinar on the coffee data project on facilitating measurement in the global coffee sector. We have more than 100 registered attendees, and we have a quite packed agenda, which looks as follows. So we will start off with giving you a brief introduction and background information about the project. This will be followed by a summary of the feedback that we have received from the survey that has been sent out recently. But the focus of this webinar will be a panel discussion, and we are extremely thankful to our three great panelists, Silvia Pisol from DNC Brazil, from Kendra Levine from McDonald's, and Marcelo Buriti of Nestle, who will be introduced later in greater detail. They will share their thoughts on the feasibility of common metrics, and the panel will be followed by a brief outline on the next steps. The webinar will be jointly hosted by Daniele Giovannici, President of COSA, as well as Annette Penzel, Executive Director of the Global Coffee Platform. We also have Jessica Mullen, Senior Measurement Systems Manager, from COSA. Thank you and welcome, Jessica. And myself, Lars Karnert, I'm Program Manager of the Global Coffee Platform. Just a little bit of housekeeping, just to let you know, the webinar will be recorded. All attendees will be muted all the time, but you have the opportunity to put your questions and comments into the Q&A box, which you will find in your menu. We might not have time to answer all the questions within the limited time frame, but we will capture the questions and provide all of you with FAQ and answers, along with a link to the webinar recording as a follow-up after the webinar. And without further ado, let me hand over to Daniele to tell us about the rationale of the project and the endeavor. The floor is yours, Daniele.
Thank you, Lars, and hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We're really excited because of the enormously innovative aspect of this piece of work that I know many of you are aware of, have participated in perhaps, and have certainly seen it coming for the better part of a decade. So we're really proud to partner with the GCP on this effort, and also with Rainforest Alliance, with support of ISEAL and other excellent. We've really had a great team working on this process, and you'll meet some of them today. I wanted to briefly frame for you some of the issues that we are trying to address in this work so that you can better contextualize the process. Part of this is, of course, I think an understanding that we all share, that we have some thorny problems, and it's not just in coffee. It's shared by commodity producers. It's shared, in fact, by agriculture in overall, and it's the problem of sustainability. And sustainability as a word, it's been widely used in agriculture only for a couple of decades. So we're still learning about it. We're still learning about this, if you will, science. And it's complex. We know it's economic, we know it's environmental, and we know it has also social implications and facets. And to understand those things, in order to really be effective in what we do and not just talk about sustainability, it's important to have a common language. Like any science, right, or any endeavor, everything from measuring the temperature outside, if we want to share that, to financial records, it's important to have the same kind of metrics, and those have eluded many of us in this field, and so this is what we're changing today, the beginning of this process, by introducing I don't want to call it the conclusion of the work, but certainly a good first stage. And what I think is important to understand about the unique value of this is that, first of all, it's been an industry-led approach. It's vital, of course, that if we have a common language, that it be science-based, that it not be based on ideas or thoughts, but actually on rigorous science. And that's a fundamental understanding that we certainly share with the GCP and with many of you, that is a common basis for all of this work. But building on top of that, it also has to be pragmatic. It can't just be science. And for us, the unique value of this is that it is an industry-led approach. It isn't just coming from the science or from the sustainability side or just from the NGO side. It is inclusive, and I think that's very important. Aligning with the public sector is one of the fundamental bases of this, because I think we'd all agree that sustainability is a public good. It isn't just a private advantage or a competitive advantage, though it can be, as many have noted, but it is a public good. And so we've made certain that we align in this work with the leading threads and themes of the public sector, including, of course, the SDGs and other important normative references globally, so that whatever we're doing in this space aligns with what governments are doing, the UN, and many agencies are also undertaking. That's important. We said that it's critical that it be realistic, and by that we mean that it's realistic in the sense of being understandable and functional, right? Not just a concept or an idea. So you'll find that the metrics are not necessarily, they don't appear to be rocket science, right? They're fairly straightforward, and I think that's a critical piece to understand, that we want to have this starting point. They're not the end point, and there's much more to do, and there are many more sophisticated metrics that we and others work with as well, but this is our starting point. And that it's important to also understand that for any metrics that, and we're talking about coffee, that while they need to be realistic for the industry, there's nowhere that they are more important or where they need to be more relevant than in terms of reflecting the actual needs of producer communities. So it's not just a concept we have, it's really being always and constantly aware of what is happening at a producer community, and are these metrics effectively reflecting or capturing that. And finally, in order to have application, and you'll see in a few minutes, Jessica will point out the results of a really interesting survey, we want to be pragmatic, and it has to be low cost. We have to do this in an agile way. So those are the framing points. We wanted to make sure we're really clear about this process, and I'd like to turn it over to my dear partner Annette, who will also continue to frame this for what it means for the GCP and for the industry overall. Annette?
Thank you very much, Daniele, and welcome everybody also from my side to this webinar. We are actually very pleased with the great interest in the topic. And at this point, I want to also, very much thank our dear partners, COSA and Rainforest Alliance in this coffee data project. But very importantly, also all of you who have actually been participating already by greatly enriching our understanding in the survey. So you filled the survey, and we will, in very short minutes, share more information about that with you. I would also like to thank the expert committee who has been guiding the project, and Jessica will also elaborate a bit more on that in a minute. As many of you will know, the Global Coffee Platform is an inclusive platform of companies and organizations, including producers and NGOs and other stakeholders, from actually everybody from all the parts of the coffee value chain. For us, it's very important to bring the different stakeholders together, because the challenges out there are big, and our aim is equally big, which is contributing to and working towards a truly sustainable and thriving coffee sector. We are doing this with our members, with partners, particularly with our partners in producing countries, national coffee platforms. And next to basically bringing people together and facilitating measurement, which we are focusing on today, the Global Coffee Platform is very much looking at enabling local action towards sustainable coffee regions. And this is where local action and measurement comes together. The Coffee Data Project, as Daniele already mentioned, is in a certain instance an important starting point. But it's not built out of the blue. It's actually built on a lot of expertise and experience from all of you and from different organizations who have been part of that journey to really understand what sustainability means and how can it really be beneficial and more beneficial for coffee producing communities and workers. The Coffee Data Project is building on the Sustainability Progress Framework. And as you might remember, the Sustainability Progress Framework has been developed by the Sustainable Coffee Challenge and GCP in a quite intense, inclusive process in the last 2 years. From there was a next step done, which was identifying high-level common indicators to enable a kind of understanding how does that sustainability progress framework actually relate to concrete change. And from there, now the coffee data project that we are going to discuss today has made another important step, and is still doing, as it's going to continue for another 2 months, to bring these high-level indicators into very practical, pragmatic, operationalized metrics. Everybody is actually measuring even similar aspects if we talk about our joint understanding about sustainability. But one of the problems is that the data don't really speak the same language. So what we believe is it's an important opportunity for us in the coffee sector to further align on these metrics, align on our understanding, enable better learning, to get more out of the measurement efforts that are happening in all different levels. And we believe that with more fact-based knowledge, information and knowledge at hand, fact-based and scientific-based information, collectively we could advance our learnings, we could advance our sustainable business development, but also, very importantly from us at GCP, really overcome the thorny issues, the thorny problems that we see, particularly in coffee producing countries. Today, as we said, we are sharing information about this further step, a step that we hope makes measurement of sustainability progress a bit more meaningful and more practical and beneficial for all of you, and particularly also for our members and the country platforms that we're working with. And I'm very interested personally as well to hear what our panelists think of those common metrics, which is going to take the biggest part of our introduction today. So with this, I would like to hand over to my colleague Lars, who gives a bit more details about the Coffee Data project as such. Over to you, Lars.
Yeah, thank you. Hello again. Just very briefly, the Coffee Data project has been a one-year project, and we are already in its last quarter, but still in between. So as mentioned, it has been implemented in partnership with Global Coffee Platform, Rainforest Alliance, and COSA, and we are also very thankful to the ISIL Innovation Fund, who is supporting the project. So the main outputs include not only a set of common metrics that are most widely used by different supply chain actors, but also certification organizations and also financial institutions to serve as a common denominator for aligned measurement. Based on a really unambiguous definition to really hammering out what exactly we are measuring, to make the metrics really comparable, we have been developing, or we're in the process of developing, a technical data standard. That means a definition of how data are technically represented, that allows machines and databases to talk to each other and to aggregate, for example, on country level, or to also exchange data if needed. And this will be accompanied by thorough user guidance and further explanations. And the final results will be published under a free-to-use Creative Commons license by March. It's also important to mention here, because it's often confused, that we are not talking about creating a technology solution or a specific reporting engine, but any of you working with data in the area of coffee sustainability measurement will be able to implement the results into your own technology solution, and this will finally enable you to reduce data production and also transaction efforts and costs, allow for comparability, aggregation, and exchange, and ultimately also prepare for SDG reporting, as it might be required in the future by, for example, by EU legislation. Having said that, in a very nutshell, I'm handing over to Jessica, who will tell us about the actual approach and the survey results.
Thank you, Lars, and a big thanks to all the respondents who are here today that participated in the process for providing input on the proposed set of indicators. As many of you know, COSA has been working with the GCP to refine the indicators with an expert committee, which you can see here on the slide, that included actors from government, research institutions, traders, certifications, retailers, and others. And it's really this consensus-driven approach that makes this process so distinct. We've worked to create an inclusive process with the industry, including actors representing a variety of perspectives, and we think that makes the work stronger. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. At this point, many of you have commented on or have been able to view the indicators themselves. You can always access those on the website that was given to you where you took the survey, or we can provide that link at the end of this webinar too. Essentially, there are 15 core indicators, which you can see here in the economic, social, and environmental spaces, as well as a set of key farm and farmer characteristics. The purpose of this project, like Lars and Annette have mentioned, was to create the lowest common denominator for these indicators and the associated technical data standards, so the taxonomy and the data architecture. This is really what adds credibility and functionality to the approach and for the sector. And a few just important high-level things to know about these indicators, which again you can look at in much more detail on the website, is that they're aligned with international norms and standards, including the Sustainable Development Goals. They're comparable across supply chains and origins, and also different commodities. So I know we have folks on the line here today in different sectors, cocoa, cotton, etc. And so these same indicators and metrics can be used with just a couple of tweaks in many different sectors, and are often the monitoring metrics that are used in those different commodities. They're also simple but not binary. We got a couple pieces of feedback around the simplicity of the approach and feeling like we needed to create a more robust set of metrics. We certainly agree in principle, but this is really this first step in creating this lowest common denominator and moving beyond a compliance approach. We wanted to create a set of metrics that would be inclusive of the whole industry. So folks like Paul Stewart at TechnoServe and a few others, we do hear you loud and clear, and we do see this as the first step of the industry kind of coalescing around a set of metrics to move the industry forward and really be able to track and measure change over time. Next slide. So many of you on this call, again, thank you for participating in the survey about the indicators. We had 78 industry experts and executives comment on the perceived value of the work and the challenges to using farm data. The good news is that there's clear recognition for the value of the work. So 86% of folks were likely to recommend that their organizations use the indicators. And as you can see here, a large portion of those indicated they were very likely. And then the final slide here. This is perhaps some of the more interesting findings in the survey. Was we asked folks to rank the use of farm data and the challenges to using it. And so we created an index here of the rankings from respondents on each topic to show the order of importance. I think there you go. And we can see immediately again on the lower right-hand side that the value is clear, right? You know, folks were not commenting that there was no value here. That's not the barrier. It really is about the how. How do we do it more effectively? And the major challenges, which we can see on the left-hand side of the screen, were related to cost, analyzing and putting the data to use, and the technology systems. And this makes sense. You know, we want useful and functional systems with common metrics like the work we're doing here, because by defining this lowest common denominator, it helps us keep the systems low cost, because we're able to measure what matters in a more automated way. And this allows us to do analytics more easily and helps us create visually coherent results. And as systems become simpler and low cost through this lowest common denominator approach, it becomes easier to pick up the work and more easily implement it. So it becomes less of a competing priority, which you can see over on the right-hand side as well. Just to touch on these last 2 points, so no agreement on what to measure right here in the middle. This is an important part of what we're trying to address here, and this is becoming more and more of a moot point as folks like the GCP and others in the industry are leading the charge on that. COSA has also done quite a bit of work with the FAO on multiple crops, creating standardized and common indicators, and with the Inter-American Development Bank on some of its projects, to name a few places where that work has been accelerated. Finally, the data privacy issue, completely important, we agree, and we've designed this work to be scrubbed and aggregated at a high level to ensure the privacy of all data submitted, but we certainly, we agree with you that that is a fundamentally important issue. Again, many thanks to the folks who participated in evaluating this work. We've read all of your comments. Thanks for sending the detailed feedback too, and we've been reaching out to folks separately as appropriate to respond to some of those questions. But at this point, we'll turn it over to the panel. So Daniele, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. And I think that it's interesting to frame those challenges, right? We don't want to be unrealistic in this space. And also to note that it is something that is very much a moving target in some ways. So what we've done is brought together some leaders in the field who not only are very deeply interested in this topic, but have also created the space, have been moving forward in this. And so what we can learn from them, I hopefully will be useful to everyone, because I think this is a challenge that isn't faced, again, just by coffee. It's a challenge around measuring the SDGs much the same way. So it's a big UN issue that's being framed right now. It's becoming a more and more of a challenge in the financial sector, as companies increasingly and financial institutions increasingly want to see that their investments have some kind of effect or an impact in the sustainability space. That's now a $10 trillion business, and metrics are critical to it. And even some of the existing metrics that are out there are, while they're a bit generic, this kind of approach that's very specific and enables the beginning of understanding impact is valuable to even to the financial sector. So we're seeing this, and we have our colleagues from the cocoa sector and cotton and many other places. And so I just want to frame that this is not just a unique or isolated effort. This effort is one that joins very many streams of similar thought in the world today. So one of the things that we want to do here is to make sure that you have time to listen to this amazing panel. So let me briefly introduce the three people to you that we have with us today. And the first one is Silvia Pizol. She's the technical advisor at CNC, the Conselho Nacional do Café in Brazil. And that organization represents Brazilian growers and cooperatives. And they're, of course, a very active member of Brazil's Coffee Policy Development Council, which is the highest public-private body in the Brazilian coffee sector. Sylvia is also a member of the National Advisory Board of the Brazilian National Platform and was part of the GCP's working group on common indicators. And of course, was one of the global experts on the committee that we convened to ensure that this had relevance. So she has a lot of great experience and perspective on this topic. We look forward to hearing from her in just a sec. We also have with us Marcelo Buriti, and Marcelo lives in the UK, and he has had at least 20 years of experience in the business. He's widely respected in coffee procurement and sustainability. He's currently the global head of coffee procurement at Nestle, and of course, many of you know that Nestle is the largest buyer of coffee in the world. And since 2015, he's been the head of green coffee development for the whole Nestle beverages business, with specific responsibilities for the global coordination of sustainability, quality, and research. So he has quite a perspective, both from the pragmatic side and the science side. And I think you'll hear that wisdom come through in his comments. And last, but certainly not least, we have with us Kendra Levine. Kendra is the sustainability manager for McDonald's. And while many of you know them as a food company, they're also one of the largest users of coffee in the world, and they actually source it in some pretty interesting ways that often surprise people at the enormous level of effort and quality that they put into that work. And so she leads their global coffee sustainability work, and within the US also leads the strategic sustainability efforts in supply chain greenhouse gas reduction and tea and logistics. And so she too brings a very diverse perspective to this work. And she previously worked, and I think this is great, she worked in the 1 Acre Fund in international agriculture development with smallholder farmers in Kenya, and she's worked also in Guatemala with Fundación Ágil. And so she has also this ground level perspective, which I think is often a good balance in this process. Okay, so let's start. I think with that brief introduction with each of the folks, I'm wondering if I could ask in that same order, if I could ask each of you for a quick start of your statement or your perspective in this process, what your organization does in COSA and how metrics relate to your work specifically. Let's start with you, Sylvia. You may have to unmute your microphone.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, CNC doesn't measure itself, the data. It's our cooperatives associated who measure this data. Some of them are very involved in the national program of the Brazilian program of the Global Coffee Platform. And we think that from the coffee growers' point of view, having this data can enable our cooperatives to assess the sustainability situation of the coffee regions, communicate their compliance with sustainability production practice to their clients, and seek additional value for it. And also identify areas where there is room for improvement. I think this is the most important of this data.
Thank you. And I think that room for improvement is always the key word, right? And you need to understand better. Great. Thank you very much. Marcelo, could I ask you to go next, please?
Yes, certainly so. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. Let's say from our point of view, data management represents both a huge opportunity and a significant challenge. From the opportunity perspective, we take from the start the saying that what you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So for us, measurement is quite important to identify the priority topics, the locations where they are more prevalent or where they take place. From there to choose the interventions that anyone would make, and that based on these measurable progress. KPIs and points and data points. You can also evaluate the interventions that you're doing as well across the regions and improve them. And ultimately, the opportunity is to generate a sort of a return on investment for sustainability investments, which is extremely important for everyone on the value chain in order to make them as efficient as possible, to make again, to bring real differences for farmers, communities, landscapes, where it really matters. From a challenge perspective, then let's say for me, it's just an analogy here. Let's say if you can imagine to have a language with multiple dictionaries, that is what happens today with concepts, and that goes from those very basic ones that you have seen shown here on the screen, and the subject of this project. Sounds very simple, but even yield is something that can have, I don't know, 20 definitions around the world. And so, again, multiple dictionaries today, and also, in order to complicate things even greater, it's like you're having multiple calculators, you know? You have 1 + 1, and then each calculator gives a different result, which is the difference in the methodologies of assessing these elements as well. So this, of course, makes it very difficult to compare things, to aggregate, even to learn from one another. So for us, that's the main challenge. Apart from the legal side of data protection, data privacy, and even some very real challenges, let's say from the real world, that in many countries, particularly with smallholders and very loose governance in general, every one of us has come across some farmers that actually don't want to be found, don't want to be analyzed, because it's let's say maybe they'll need to start paying taxes or something like this, So there are a lot of challenges behind this as well, but it's a crucial importance from our perspective in in Nestle, and particularly on the Nescafé side, we have more than 100,000 farmers in value chains that we have direct involvement in, and that of course provides us with opportunity to manage data, to learn, and to use all this into monitor evaluation, to an improvement framework. We have already for some years a partnership with Rainforest Alliance, which is also present in this group, for assisting us in assessing the impact and the results of what we do within that framework. We have started also working with Enveritas, which from our perspective, from what we have seen so far, they're doing a very great work, to bring that transparency, that diagnosis, of what goes on the ground, with a lot of granularity. And also we participate very happily with the Global Coffee Platform, which is taking also very big strides in Brazil with the launch of the app, that you probably will know more about if you don't already do, from Annette and the team. And Vietnam is also moving forward, so there is a lot of good action in that field already, on top of this project here. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcelo. And I take away many good points from what you said, the challenges that are out there, and yet that many people are endeavoring to address them, and that if we're going to have learning, that we need to begin working more closely together. And I think that's a critical point that you've noted, I think, quite well. I like your examples very much. Perhaps one of the wise points that I always think about as well is that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And so if we're serious about sustainability, then we need to be serious about measuring it to know if we're improving it or not, and for learning. So those are all great points. Thank you for starting us off with that. And Kendra, let's
yeah, sure. So I'm going to start off a little bit about McDonald's involvement with coffee, because that may not be as familiar to everyone on the line as Nestle's work, for example. So for McDonald's, coffee is one of the products that we have a target to source 100% sustainably by 2020, and we're on track to meet that, which we're really excited about. We will count coffee towards that as meeting that goal if it's Rainforest Alliance, UTZ, or Fair Trade certified. Or we will count it if the coffee is sourced through a program that meets a verified framework that we developed in partnership with Conservation International called McCafe Sustainable Improvement Platform, or what we call McCafe SIP. I'm going to go a bit more into detail around McCafe SIP, because that's where we've done the majority of our metrics work to date. So SIP, it's a framework to engage and guide our coffee supply chain in sustainable sourcing, as well as investing in coffee growers and their communities over the long term. So if our roasters choose this option to provide us sustainably sourced coffee, the McDonald's and our franchisees pay a premium to enable the roasters to develop programs in collaboration with the communities that they source from. And with that premium, they provide, for example, direct premiums to farmers, as well as farmer training, technical assistance, tools and resources, and measurement and evaluation. So the SIP framework consists of 4 pillars. There's transparency, producer collaboration, measured performance, and assurance. For transparency, we define that as visibility to the farm and farmers where our coffee is sourced from. We have a list of all the farmers that are providing coffee to us through McCafe SIP, for example. Within producer collaboration, we define that pillar as activities that are designed and implemented in collaboration with producers to provide the skills and tools that are necessary for them to improve their performance over time. And that producer collaboration needs to be determined by a needs assessment that's done upfront. And this is integrated into the commercial relationship between our roasters all the way upstream with the farmers. That third pillar of measured performance means that our roasters are monitoring compliance and continuous improvement towards sustainability goals in in those three areas that were mentioned before around sustainability, so in the ethical, environmental, and economic dimensions. And then lastly, the assurance pillar, we have a rigorous protocol around assuring that the data that's reported to us is accurate, including third-party audits. So getting into the metrics side, this past year, we worked to define metrics to be reported to us by our roasters on an annual basis for each of the SIP programs that are on the ground regarding the transparency, producer collaboration, and around compliance and continuous improvement. And we did that because we felt it was necessary to collect information on an annual basis on these programs. One, to bring credibility to the framework, because this was a framework that is ultimately owned by McDonald's, and we want to make sure that we have data to back up our work in this space. But also because we wanted to make sure that we could be measuring progress over time and that we were ultimately driving the impacts that the program was developed with the intention to provide. We're also engaging with the certifications that we accept to identify opportunities to receive metrics reporting from them for the certified coffee that we source. So I'll stop there with my intro.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much, Kendra. That's a good perspective, and I think it illustrates an approach that isn't uncommon today, that especially with many firms in the field finding that they cannot source one approach or cannot use just one approach to sustainability, that they have often evolved their own practices, things that fit both their corporate ethos and their sourcing needs. And so I think it's useful to note that, like many of those, the ones that are credible certainly, that the rigor of the data is a vital part. It doesn't make any sense gathering data if it isn't effective or science-based or really useful in terms of decision making or what we call actionable data, and I think that's important. Another point I just want to point out that you've expressed well is the inclusion, as Marcelo said, also the inclusion of certification in the process, and where it doesn't meet a particular need, where you're not getting coffee that is certified, the ability to still have it be part of a process. So an integrated approach to that is, I think, becoming more and more common among many companies. So I think that's an important thread, and the way to bring all of that together, or to have it be integrated and intelligent from the procurement side and even from the communication side, is having, I think, common metrics, the ability to tell a narrative, express a story, and actually understand risk and what's happening at origin more effectively with one set of metrics across all of it. So that's really great. Thank you for sharing your journey on that process. In fact, let me start with you in some of the questions that are, I think, top of mind in the work that we've done over the last 6 months in this process, questions that have been raised quite frequently, and I see some are coming in already, and I'd like to encourage everyone to please submit those questions. If we don't answer them all today, we'll certainly make sure that we do send you those answers, hopefully within a day or two. So, Kendra, a number of industries have started, as we said earlier, creating a standard way of measuring these key issues. But that's become less so in smallholder farming systems. And as those farming systems are sometimes remote and not accessible, we don't expect 100% inclusion, but certainly the smallholder is the key and not just in coffee, but certainly in coffee, with somewhere around 80% of global production. And so since we certainly have to take that into account, what are the pros and cons that you perceive for having better metrics around this aspect of coffee production, the smallholder production space?
A major pro for us is what I mentioned before around the credibility. Having these metrics defined helps at the industry level, brings credibility to our work in measuring our progress. So when they're defined at the industry level, and it's not just something that we develop as a company, that we know that we have something that we can lean on that shows, look, in the data that we're collecting, this isn't just something that was important to McDonald's, but this is something that has been agreed upon throughout the whole industry, and as you said, Daniele, that are science-based. And this is something that's really important to us as McDonald's, not just in one category that we source, but really across all of the categories that we're sourcing that are priorities for us in sustainable sourcing. We definitely, because we are such a large company and we source a lot of volume of any product that we source, it is important that we work within the industries that we're in to make sure that there's alignment there and that we're not just creating our own system. This is really important, again, like within beef, for example, where there's just a ton of actors. We want to make sure that what we're developing isn't just a McDonald's thing, but it's something that we know that the whole industry and multiple stakeholders, including NGOs and scientists, have agreed to. So definitely see that as being important. The pros here is, Marcelo mentioned this, but it really, or maybe it was in you, Daniele, sorry about that, but it brings that clarity to what sustainability means, because it is this term that means so many things to so many different people, and that consumers, it might have different perspectives from consumers in other parts of the world and different perspectives of different people at different levels of the supply chain. So it's important to define these metrics as an industry so everyone is talking using this common language, and when we say a word that we know what that means, that we're all referring to the same thing. It also allows for this collection of comparable data, so that we're able to look at data and gain insights around what's going well and what needs greater focus. We are going to be collecting these metrics that I mentioned that we developed, and we want to gain insights for our company, but if there can be greater value across the industry, that is definitely desired. And if we can gain insights into our supply chain, looking at other people's data, that's also very welcome. We're excited about that possibility.
Great.
I do see an opportunity here where for those who haven't created metrics yet, it could decrease the cost of needs assessment or allow just more impact evaluations that the industry could learn from.
Great. Thank you for that. Marcelo, from your, actually, I'm sorry, let's go to Sylvia, I apologize. Sylvia, from your perspective, why metrics? So in the production space in Brazil, which has small farmers, large, and some of the world's largest farmers as well, so that big picture perspective you have, what advantages can you see in having a consistent data standard, and what disadvantages, at least for the predominant production or the sustainability topics that farmers face on a day-to-day basis? How does it help them? How does it make a difference? Or does it not? How does it hurt them, if it does? Sylvia? We may have you muted. If I can ask the organizers to unmute her, was that all right? Let's see if that's the case, or maybe that she's having a connectivity. There we go.
Yeah, there's a connectivity thing. Perhaps we can move on with Marcelo in the meantime, and then get back.
Great. Let's absolutely. Marcelo, what's your perspective on that, about metrics from the perspective that you're familiar with from the production side?
Yeah, let's see. From the advantage of metrics and of having this framework of data and cost-effective assessment, actually allows us to understand our value chains and to be able to assist, where it matters, in what it matters. And also to better coordinate actions across the value chain and potentially on a pre-competitive basis as well with peers, with civil society, other roasters and all this. But I think it's very important for us to keep also in mind that no matter let's say no matter, as well as the value that it creates for the upstream supply chain, better metrics also should bring a lot of value to the farmers as well. in the same way. And I see, well, let's see, but just a net benefit for farmers from having these metrics would be that they have actually more effective programs being brought to them by their cooperatives or by their clients or by NGOs or anyone in the value chain. Again, from we have there are farmer training events out there that you have a lot of more attendance because you're actually giving them something to eat and some food on the table than actually the topic that sometimes the farmers don't see much relevance to it. But you know, it's a social occasion and all this, and there is some food at the end, so I mean you get a lot of attendance, but very little result actually for the farmers themselves in their activity. So again, that good data management should it brings a lot of value, of course, to the whole value chain. But let's not forget that let's say it brings a lot of value also for the farmers.
I like that perspective, that it can indeed have value, and that it becomes critical to coordinate actions, doesn't it? That without that ability at origin, there is no one company, even a Nestle or a McDonald's or any large firm, isn't sufficient to create the structural change, the long-term change that's necessary, or the improvements at origin. So the ability to collaborate becomes important, that anything around collective action, in fact, the definition of collective action is indeed the ability to coordinate and to have common metrics or common approach. And I particularly like the idea you've noted about value to farmers, because I think there is an emerging trend. We're working on some projects across Africa and in Latin America as well, looking toward the democratization of data. That's our term for it, at least, and which is essentially making more and more information available that matters to farmers, that they say matters to them, in a way that they can use, right? And the ability to get value all the way down to farmers, which is where ultimately it should be. If the data doesn't serve them, then the data, in my view, is fundamentally flawed. And so the ability to create using technologies that are available today, that integration of farmers, and as you say, creating value for the farmers is a vital piece of this. So that's really, I appreciate that perspective. And as we're trying to get Sylvia back online, hopefully she'll join as soon as she can with her connectivity challenges. Let me pose a question over to Kendra. It's essentially the same one around the constraints from the production side that you've seen, because while you're not sourcing directly, you coordinate your supply chain very, very actively, and to ensure that these processes are undertaken, that you have a sustainable supply chain. So you have a perspective that goes down. It isn't just I'm buying from from procurement. You're actually engaged. What's happened in your perspective in terms of metrics? Has it affected anything? Are there any benefits you're seeing already in that process at origin? Kendra?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Because we defined the official kind of SIP metrics that we're going to be collecting last year, we haven't, this will be the first year where we will see that information come through in a consistent way. So one challenge that we had up until now is we did ask that our roasters be collecting compliance information and continuous improvement, but we hadn't given explicit direction on what we wanted them to be collecting. So the challenge that we had before is similar to what has been talked about here, where we were getting a lot of data from our supply chain that was great, but it wasn't something that was comparable. It wasn't something that we could look at and say, overall, this is how SIP is performing, or this is, yeah, basically that. So we're really excited about having a consistent set of metrics where we will be able to look across the entire SIP platform and be able to draw some conclusions up from there.
Great point about comparability. You are certainly not the only company. I suspect there are a lot of heads nodding across the world now in terms of having comparability. people who get various reports from different origins if you're running projects or sourcing issues, and it's almost impossible to have clarity, right, across the board. And so this comparability is, I think, a vital point for everyone in terms of learning. Let me turn it back to Marcelo for just a moment. As a manager, as a person who is overseeing a lot of this work, but also has a number of managers working for you, how does data specifically affect your decision making? Are there ways you need that data to occur? Are there ways that it's currently actively integrated? How can this kind of data that we're talking about, having it available to you because you source globally, of course, how can it affect your decision making to get towards sustainability more and more and more, being more effective, in other words? How are you using it?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So, I mean, in many ways, that's a short answer. There is, as I mentioned before, we have benefit from data from the work of the partners that we have, including the 4C program as well, which is let's say managing data quite well as well. But let's say transparency of data, I think it allows us to pick the right battles where it matters most. It allows us to be much better in establishing priority countries, priority regions, priority interventions, to measure what the investments that we have in programs in a much better way, linked to actual results. I mean, if you're doing something there, it's because you want to achieve something. If you don't have a way to measure, then there is nothing. There's nothing that you can do, and also, even let's say from an internal perspective, it is a vital tool for managing our own resources as well. You know, we have a great number of agronomists and field staff that are on a daily basis on the field dealing with farmers, and without proper data management or effective data management, then it's quite difficult actually to measure the work and then to assist and to even deploy these people in the best way possible. And so it is also a very effective management tool for the ones that are engaged in the value chain.
That's a great point about efficiencies, and I know that in one of your companies, in Nespresso specifically, they've been extraordinary at using data to drive results, and have had extraordinary results as a part of that process. And I think that's there's some notable efforts that have been undertaken. So efficiencies is a key piece of this, isn't it? The ability to look at sustainability and to look at it in the most cost-effective manner possible, so that we can indeed affect it and really make it part of the business case, right? Creating it within the business rather than it existing as a philanthropic aspect or an extra in the business. Sylvia, I understand you're back, and welcome back. Sorry, we've lost you for a moment. I was hoping you could address the question of how, from the producer perspective, where you see the pros and cons of data, and especially at origin, the issues that are faced by producers. What are you seeing as the main challenges in having credible and producer level data or integration into this process?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I lost connection
Okay.
for a moment. So I think as a pro, having this data is an important tool to attract investments and strengthen partnerships with industries and other stakeholders to share responsibilities and the costs for producing more sustainable coffees. I think that another pro for having this data is that representative organizations like Conselho Nacional do Café can work in partnership with the government of the producer country to build more effective policies to communicate the compliance of the coffee sector with sustainable practice, and mainly optimize investments in research, technology transfer, and training of farmers to improve areas that may need more attention. So I think this is the main importance of having this data. I think a challenge that we may face is that from the farmer's perspective, there may be concern about information security. Some producers may be reluctant to share information because they are still not sure how secure their properties and activities information will be, and whether that data will actually be used to benefit them. It's therefore very important to guarantee strong safety protocols. We have worked on them in our Brazilian program, and to clearly communicate to farmers the potential benefits and the risks of measuring sustainability indicators. I think that's it.
Good points all, and I think a good comment on the topic, that I think it's critical that farmers both be engaged in this process, that we have the representation of origin, the understanding of origin. Having conducted many hundreds of thousands of surveys in the field, we feel absolutely certain that we concur with you that is a vital piece of the answer. And so that's where value occurs for them, and it has to occur for them, as we've said many times. We're coming just close to the concluding minutes, and I wanted to take a moment, if we could get maybe a one key perspective or challenge or what you'd like to see in the industry from each of you. And if I can start with Kendra for just a 30-second wrap up of your final comments. Kendra?
Hi. I would just end by saying that we're excited to be able to see the data that will come in this year through SIP, and to work with the certifications that we accept to get more data around our certified coffee, because I imagine that this will help validate some of our work, but also we expect it to challenge us to refine our strategy and help us drive those real impacts on the ground that we're all looking for. And both of those are really welcome.
Great. Real impact is the key. I agree with you. Sylvia, your last comment or thought?
Oh, okay. First of all, I'd like to congratulate your team, COSA, for the pragmatic approach given to the metrics, really keeping it simple and measuring what matters. I think this will facilitate a lot measuring these indicators on the ground. And I'd like to take a moment to highlight the major importance of the indicator that is not in the set discussed today in this webinar, that is sustainable coffee purchases, because it's directly linked to economic sustainability as it measures the growth of the demand. And we see a lot of programs and incentives to increase coffee supply around the world. And when supply grows faster than demand, we face price crises like now, when coffee growers don't get the reward for their hard work to produce sustainable coffees. So we at Conselho Nacional do Café think that choosing the indicator that measures the evolution of the demand for sustainable coffee as the first to be implemented was the right decision, and shows that GCP work has been tailored to meet the needs of the coffee growers. So congratulations to GCP, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in this webinar.
Thank you. Marcelo, last words. We have less than a minute left, and I wanted to give Annette her final as well.
It'll be very, very short and sweet here. I mean, we have about 100 participants on this telco, which is very encouraging. So I would like to invite everyone to engage with Global Coffee Platform, Rainforest Alliance, with COSA in this journey. Everyone has particular experiences, insights that are extremely valuable of all this process. So I invite everyone to be part of this process with us.
Thank you, Marcelo. Great. And Annette, please take us home.
Great. We are almost at the end of the time here. It was really exciting to listen to the exchange with the panelists. So thank you, panelists, and thank you, Daniele, for that. Now, what are the next steps, actually? It's perhaps superfluous to say that the metrics that are now coming out of this project are not cast in stone, but will, of course, need to be further improved. That is very clear. What else is GCP going to do? We are going to take the indicator and measurement work further in the next couple of years in a follow-up program to also particularly include more explicitly the governments through collaboration with the International Coffee Organization. This is super important for us to work with the coffee producing countries, as Sylvia has also been mentioning. This next program step will also include sharing experiences with other sectors. Particularly, we're looking there at the cotton sector and have already agreed to work together. We also look into using data to generate value-adding services and benefits for farmers, because that is necessary, absolutely. And certainly, last but not least, the aim of the next couple of years program is to also come up with very concrete methodologies to enable companies and governments on further reporting requirements for the future. Additionally, and in a totally separate line, TCP will start working with its roaster and retailer members this year to gather, collect, and aggregate information about the sustainable purchase. We will, to the GCP members, make particular information available in due time. Now, if you have questions, and I'm sure there are, we have received a lot of questions through the chat box and didn't have now time to really pick them up. You can either contact us directly, but the next concrete steps as well are, we will of course share the recording and the frequently asked questions in the next couple of days with all of you. And then you see here on the screen now a link. If you want to engage further, and that is a big invitation here to you, click on this link and please, actually it's in the chat box right now, so please click on the link so that we can give you the results of the project, including the data standard by end of March. And please do also click on the link and register so that we can make sure you stay engaged and tuned on what else is happening in the area of measurement and indicator work of the Global Coffee Platform, together with different partners, including the ICO and many others. So thanks again for your participation. Thank you, Danielle and Jessica from COSA side, and thank you, Lars, and the team here who has been helping us with the webinar. Special thanks to our panelists. Goodbye, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.